What's up, coaches? This is Corey Harris, and I'm back with the Transition, a real resource for coaches. I have a super special guest here, head coach of SMU, Rob Lanier. Coach Rob, thank you so much for your time. It's an honor having you here on the Transition podcast.
Thanks for having me, and it's great that you're doing this for coaches. This type of thing is needed, so I applaud you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I appreciate that. So I don't want to take up too much of your time. Like before we even got on the call, you told me you're busy chopping up film. You're trying to make sure that your team is prepared. You're practice planning. Where are you right now in the midst of the season? Just kind of let people in on what it's like to be you in the middle of a basketball season.
Well, I wouldn't. There's a lot of people that wouldn't want to trade places with me right now. We've taken on a great challenge, great opportunity here at SMU, and we're I think 10 games into the season right now with a really new group that's obviously never played together before, and the guys who have played haven't played in the roles that we have them in. So we're a real work in progress, and quite honestly, this is a great test for me as a coach. I'm being stretched as a coach right now, and so we've gotten off to a slow start, but this is probably one of my greatest challenges as a coach, to try to find a way to make the most with a really good group of players and young people where we're missing some pieces and trying to compensate for maybe some of our shortcomings through the decisions that we make as coaches, as opposed to complaining about what we don't have.
Gotcha.
And it's a great challenge, because the easy thing to do is say, well, we don't have this, and this, and concede whatever limitations you have, and whatever disappointments you might experience, just chalk that up to what is not on your roster. And we're fighting that, because we do like our group enough to know that we can really get better and play at a higher level. And so finding ways to do that on offense, we know what we got to do defensively. That doesn't change very much. It really is a great challenge, and if we approach it that way, we'll get better.
Yes, sir. Where does that mindset come from, where you don't concede, you don't fall into that pit of making excuses or complaining? Like where does that grit and just the need to find solutions come from in you?
Well, I think it's what we all do as coaches. You're always trying to find a way to improve, and certainly, I guess it's, part of my default as a coach is, when things aren't going great, to look in the mirror. That's what we ask our players to do. But inherently, as the leader of a program, you have to look at it that way. Like, what could you do better? And there's a trickle-down effect that you expect from there. But if I'm finger pointing, so will they. And so, I try to look at it like, there's got to be something we can be doing better. Some of those things are obvious that we just got to get better at. But schematically, there's some things that we can do to mitigate some of what we don't have on our roster. And I, as experienced as I am, I've been around for a long time. I do not have a frame of reference for our current situation to draw from. I can't say, well, when I was at Florida and we had this same scenario, here's how we handled it, or when I was at any other place. So this is unique, and I think that's the great thing about how I'm being stretched. So I'm not looking forward to trying to put together the same scenario, but if I should encounter it, I'll have this experience to draw from.
That's right. You're setting the precedents. I got you. So talk about your coaching stops. You mentioned Florida. What have been all the different places that you've coached and the different influences that you've had?
The places, first of all, in 1990, I joined the staff as a graduate assistant at Niagara University for a very young coach at the time by the name of Jack Armstrong. Jack was he was the interim guy, and became the full-time coach in the spring of 1990, and and hired me shortly thereafter. He's currently the color analyst for the Toronto Raptors basketball, and he looks younger now than he did back then. He
Less
was
stress.
definitely, yeah, he was definitely, he looked older and more mature, and what a great guy. Gave me a great opportunity, gave me a lot of responsibility. So he was an influence because he was so organized and so hardworking. He was a New York guy. He was tough. Um, he had a great influence on me a couple of ways because he was truly organized, almost, sort of OCD in his mode of operation, but he also gave me a lot of responsibility at a very young age, and that did bode well for me because I earned the opportunity to have relationships with the players. I was younger than some of them, and I had to learn how to draw that professional line between them being my peers and me being a professional at the time, and I had to learn that balance right away at age 22. So that was great. And then I spent 5 years at St. Bonaventure with Jim Barron. He's a St. Bonaventure alum like myself. And we went back there at a time where the program was struggling, and had an opportunity to rebuild that program. And I learned a lot from Jim, just in terms of the overall impact of how you treat people, and from a coaching standpoint, you couldn't work for a more positive guy. The glass was always half full. Just his enthusiasm and passion for the game had a lasting effect on me. And then I went to Rutgers for 2 years. And then after Rutgers, I got the opportunity to go work with Rick Barnes. And, in all, I spent 10 years with Rick, but I just spent those two at that time. And then I became the head coach at Siena for 4 years. And we had some moderate success. We went to the NCAA tournament my first year, NIT my second year. Had some significant wins when we were there over a couple of Big East schools. And after 4 years there, I went to University of Virginia with Dave Leto. And in our second year, we won the regular season in the ACC. Dave got Coach of the Year. And then after that, I spent 4 years at University of Florida with Billy Donovan, and Hall of Fame caliber coach. And you can't spend 4 years around Billy and not learn a lot and be exposed to a lot of great basketball, not just because of Billy's presence, but the organization that he put together. One of our GAs was Mark Dagnall, who's the head coach of
Wow.
OK Thunder now.
Yeah.
Shaka Smart was on that staff.
Wow.
Larry Chiat was on that staff. Richard Pitino, who's the head coach at University of New Mexico. So I was around some great coaches, some great staff meetings, and some really high achieving people. And after 4 years, because I knew Billy before too long would take on the NBA, I didn't want to go to the NBA.
Okay.
So I went back to Texas with Rick Barnes, spent 4 years at Texas, and then 4 years at Tennessee before coming to Atlanta, where I met you, and spent 3 years at Georgia State. And now I'm in Dallas, hopefully my last stop. So
Got you. No, love that. Love that. Talk a little bit about the qualities that make a good assistant coach, because it sounds like you've had a lot of stops where you were a steward and you served what maybe was something that belonged to someone else, like Billy Donovan. These different coaches who were in leadership positions, they delegated, they gave you opportunities. Doesn't sound like you squandered any of those opportunities. It sounded like you constantly leveled up. But at the same time, you had to, of course, know that your goal was to be a head coach one day. So talk about that balance, of knowing what you want, but also being willing to serve and being willing to be a part of something that's bigger than you as an assistant coach.
Yeah, the your reputation in the profession is so important. I think that's what you're touching on. I talk about it all the time. Anybody that's heard me speak a number of times, I always refer to that. And I think one of the biggest aspects of your personality and your reputation that could serve you the best is to be humble. Obviously, we're all in a competitive endeavor, and there's leadership attached to all of these positions on a staff, even if you're not the leader. It's a collection of leaders with different roles and responsibilities. The head coach's job is to oversee the entire program, but he's also a leader of other men who are in fact leaders, and they have to have those leadership qualities, but be humble enough to understand that there's someone in charge, and there's a level of loyalty that you have to that person's vision. And so it's important, to work hard and to try to do a great job as a communicator. But your communication has to be filled with a message that backs the vision of the guy whose program it is. And so there's a foundation of humility that you have to function that way. And when you do, that resonates. And when you don't, that resonates in an unfortunate way. And I've seen that even from inside of a staff where you have people who are so caught up in getting credit or standing out inside of a program, as opposed to simply just trying to serve the program, including the head coach, but trying to serve the young people and serve the community and serve the institution and represent it in that way. And when you do that, if you're good, people notice. And if you're good, but you don't approach it that way, people notice. And so you might have great basketball acumen, tremendous communication skills, but if you channel that in a self-serving way, it speaks volumes. And so I think it's important for young coaches, no matter how passionate they are and no matter how much they think they know about the game, to approach it with a humble disposition in the interest of the whole, and let your work speak for itself.
That's right. That's right. Are those the qualities that you now as a head coach look for when hiring some of the men that work with you on your staff? Because when you were so gracious to let me come to, your practices at Georgia State, and I saw, like you said, a group of leaders, right? It wasn't just, you out there and guys standing on the sidelines, because I've been to pro and college level practices where there's just one voice and everyone's just kind of listening and just watching. But your practices, everyone has a role. Everyone is in a position where they can influence and bring something to the table. Is there a blueprint for what you look for when you're hiring, when you're choosing your staff members?
Yeah. And I think I've gotten better at identifying it, because it all starts with the humility part. I really do. Even when I first came to do a press conference at Georgia State, I was pulling into the driveway, and I had two ties. I hadn't picked out one yet that I was going to wear when I got upstairs. And Jarvis Hayes was in the parking lot. And he helped me pick out a tie. And he attended the press conference. And it was just something in my spirit that attracted me to him. He did not mention that he was there in any way to get to know me with the interest in getting a job. He sat in the back. I noticed him. I recognized him. I remember when he was a player. I obviously knew who Jonas was, but I knew it wasn't Jonas. How, I don't know, but I knew it wasn't Jonas. And after the press conference, I was looking for him, and he was gone.
Mm.
And once I got Chris Kreider and Cliff Warren, who was a great friend at the time already, and I knew him, and I had brought several people with me from University of Tennessee that I knew. And so now we got to fill this last spot. And all these names are flying around and people were making recommendations, but I just kept coming back to Jarvis. He had just left an impression on me of humility for a guy who had a pretty impressive basketball journey. He could have a different disposition, but instead he was truly a humble man who wanted an opportunity. So I reached out to him, and even when I talked to him, he did not make a case for himself. It was interesting. All he talked about was wanting to learn and wanting to grow. And I thought he was an ideal person to come and learn from Chris and Cliff, but also to share his journey with young people, because he's a father, husband, ex-NBA player who really was interested in starting at the bottom of our profession and work his way up. And I couldn't get past that when and so we ended up hiring him, and I couldn't have made a better decision. And, because the humility piece means so much. And he's the guy who could walk around with a different attitude.
That's right.
And instead, he truly is a humble man. And as a result, we hit a home run there. And obviously Chris, Cliff, and those guys, those guys are terrific, and everybody knows that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shout out to Coach Jarvis. I did not know that story. The two ties helping you out at the press conference. That's dope. So sticking with that time period, you being at Georgia State, what was it like building that program? Because I can remember growing up. Sorry about that, Coach. 1 second. All right. Had a phone call. We'll edit that out. All right. But I can remember as a kid growing up, Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. Georgia State was never, a school to be feared, reckoned with. They had some years with, R.J. Hunter and that run that they made, but it was somewhat of a flash in the pan. And it's no disrespect to any other coaches that were there before, but what was it like building that program to the point where now you guys are conference champions? You've got young men leaving that program and going on to do great things on the next level or have the chance to go overseas. Like, take us through some of that journey all the way up to obviously you guys winning and making a run in the tournament.
Yeah, I do think some of the credit has to go to Ron Hunter, because Ron built a strong, formidable program where the expectations were high. And the group that I inherited, obviously we had some turnover and some changes, but the young people that were in the program approached everything with an expectation to win, because that's all they knew. And so the challenge we had was to try to carry that forward in our way of doing things. And I came there with a long-term mindset that I would be there. One of the things that Rick Barnes had always implored me to do was, if you take a job, do it because you think you can be happy there for 10 years. If you can't see yourself being there beyond the short term, then don't do it.
Wow.
And so I came to Atlanta with that mindset that if I didn't get another job, that I could build this into something that would have some sustainability. And on the strength that Ron had established a winning culture, the question for me was, can we build a program that has real sustainable success for however long I might continue to coach? And we were building a brand new arena. So there was going to be some upgrades, and we thought we could really raise the profile on the program because it already had a winning reputation. So how much could we build on top of what Ron had done, quite honestly? And we felt like we were in the process of trying to do that. And I was looking forward in that regard. And before you know it, this opportunity came along.
Yes, sir. You had a moment in practice that sticks out to me so much, and I don't want to try to even quote you because I can't, but you took a couple minutes after to really break down the difference between a guy who knows exactly what he wants, and he wants greatness, and he's pursuing that every day, like it's in his routine, it's in his lifestyle, his mindset is seen in all of his actions. It's in him versus a guy who's just claiming that that's what he wants. And you just seem to have a way to communicate with your players on such a high level, even when I can tell you want to just, probably say a few explicit words or shut it down and kick everybody out of the gym. You just have a way to like still communicate even when you're upset or you're frustrated. Where does that come from? And how do you view communicating with players maybe in moments where other coaches wouldn't even know how to connect with them?
Well, I'm still trying to get better in that way also. And one of the things I say a lot is I think young people are the same as we were when we were growing up.
Mm.
I'm not bought into the idea that young people are wired differently and have a different DNA, but I do think they're confronted with much more clutter because they have grown in a world much different than the world that we all grew up in. There's more information for them to sort through. And so there are some undesirable behaviors that young people exhibit as a result of the world they grew up in, but they didn't create the iPhone. They didn't create all of the things that really affect the way they perceive the world. But at their core, they want the same things that most of us all wanted when we were growing up. But harder to see it because there's so much in the way. And so the challenge for us as coaches is to find a way to reach them. And there are some old school ways that still apply. And there's some other ways that might be more conducive to where these young people are now, and trying to strike that balance is an ongoing challenge. There's no right way to do it. And my way of communication isn't for everybody. And one of the challenges we all have is to identify young people that you can reach and have those talented young people in your program versus people that you can't necessarily reach. And people have different talents when it comes to that as coaches. Sometimes I see young people and I see various coaches who have a tremendous ability to reach guys that it might take me so much longer to get to. And so I have a staff who kind of knows that, can identify guys, at least to the best of our ability, who are the guys that are going to get the most out of what we bring to the table. And so, so my way doesn't always work, and people don't always receive it. You just caught me on a good day.
No, I'm sure 9 times out of 10 it works, but I think it's just so much of the fact that you don't fear holding your guys accountable. You don't fear if they're going to like you or if they're going to, still have you as their favorite person or whatever. Like, I think you're more so focused on them understanding exactly what is needed from them in that moment and then let the chips fall afterwards. But that was something I really took from you. You said the word balance in your previous statements. And that's actually how we got on this call. I sent you a text message asking you about balance, because I only see what posts allow me to see. But obviously, I see the success you have as a coach. I see the ability you have to connect with your players, type of work that you put in. It's obviously going to lead to some type of success. So that goes without saying. But how do you balance all that with being a family man, being a husband, being a father? I think this coaching profession is a grueling one, no matter what level you're on, if you commit to it. How are you able to not just survive, but thrive in the midst of that?
Yeah. Some of it is luck. You got a partner that you're connected with and aligned with your goals and aspirations. And it allows you to share in that journey with someone And the balance is inside of that. You know, I got a great wife who we're committed to one another in totality. And so by virtue of that, I can dive into this because that's where my passion is, but we're in the undertaking together. And so we find that balance inside of this journey. This journey is a part of our connection. So it's not like something that's totally separate. You know, my passion and love for the game is a part of who I am. That drive and that ambition that makes me who I am is part of what attracted her to me, and vice versa. And so um, it all goes together. And so the balance is finding different ways to explore the other parts of your personality and the things you like to do so that you can have a certain measure of mental health and enjoyment in other areas of your life that you enjoy personally, the kind of things that you enjoy to do with your family and with your spouse. And if you have a relationship like that, it really does. You do that together, the relationship with the kids and all of that stuff. It's all part of our journey. My kids have grown up on a college campus, you know, um, and they've been around the game and they've experienced the perks that come with it. But it's been a real positive aspect of their lives that they cherish, and they get to see the world through a lens that my wife and I's union has created. And um, so there's different ways to find balance, but I do think it's not like um, this part of who I am and my family life are totally separate entities that I have to find ways to, you know, we're connected through all of this. And
Okay.
so there's some balance inherent in it. And then personally, we have to find ways to do the other things outside of this that we enjoy, particularly me, because I struggle with that part sometimes. But in terms of my connection with my family, I don't feel like this has taken me away from them at all.
I've never heard it like that. I like that. So it's integrated.
Yeah.
It's woven together. Got you. Got you. You spoke earlier about not wanting to make that transition with Coach Donovan to the NBA level. Is that something that you've always known when you began your college coaching career, that you didn't want to work on the professional level?
Yeah, except for one brief moment. You know, you're probably aware of my website, coachspeak.net. If not, you know,
No,
check it
sir. No,
out.
sir. Yes, sir. Will do.
So it's another hobby of mine. And I created the platform in 2017. There's a lot of good stories on there. And what you're doing with transition is something I think you would take an interest in,
Okay.
coachspeak.net, just the way it
Okay.
sounds. And I'm working on a book myself. It's not an autobiography. It's a collection of stories that have come out of my journey in coaching. And I just happen to be in the middle of a lot of, I don't think my personal story is necessarily interesting, but my journey in coaching has produced a lot of really interesting stories. And one of those stories is in 2007 when I went to University of Florida. Within a matter of days after I had moved down there, Billy accepted the head coaching job with the Orlando Magic. I went down there on a Tuesday, and I'm moving into my office. And on Friday, he's doing a press conference with the Magic. And so over that period of time, he offered me to come to Orlando with him. And that was the only time that I ever considered the NBA. And I was actually a little bit excited about the possibilities in the moment. And then by Sunday of that same weekend, he changed his mind and decided to come back to Florida. And that was that. And so after 4 years there with him, I knew that eventually he would go to the NBA. And so I got ahead of that and went back to Texas with Coach Barnes. So,
Wow.
so I wrote one of the chapters in my book is that time frame from Tuesday to Sunday, and that story, which is actually a chapter in the book, is on the page.
Oh man, oh, I can't wait to read it whenever you get it done. But so there are a lot of coaches out there who they think that that's what they want. They think they want to either coach internationally or coach in the NBA. And it's not for any particular reason other than maybe the fact that they see someone else doing it, right? What is it about coaching young men on the college level for you that I guess relates to your identity and it is something that for you, you say like, this is where I've been called to?
Yeah, I never quite thought about it in that particular way. I know this is where my comfort is, and
Okay.
when I was a young upstart at Niagara, 90 through 92, the responsibilities that I did have is I was the strength coach, I was the academic coordinator. I had to do what was called film exchange back then. That was a big deal, and a lot of responsibility, required a lot of organization. And I had a significant amount of on-court responsibility. And so I was there from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. daily, because I had them in the weight room in the morning, and I was working on a master's degree at that time.
Wow.
So for $3,500 a year.
Oh,
So so that being said, um, I was around the players a lot, and I was an authority, and I was in a position of authority. And when the time came after my second year where I was offered the job at St. Bonaventure, I had to stand in front of the team and tell them that I was leaving. And it was such an emotional experience and moment that I really, I mean, some of these guys were my same age or just a year or so younger, or even in a couple of cases, there were guys that were there that were older than me. I thought it was a moment that I think back on, that where I knew that I wanted to be with young people.
yeah.
I really cared about those guys. I wanted them to get their education. I wanted them to work hard. I wanted them to see life beyond basketball. And I was talking that talk at 22 to these guys. But I was also there the whole time, and I was checking on their homework and checking with their professors, and I was fresh out of college, but those guys really knew, and there was so much emotion in that room that I was going to be leaving, that I really felt drawn to that part of this. And as the head coach, it's not quite the same, but it is the same vantage point from which I view my profession. And obviously, there's a competitive piece. But this is year 33 for me. I talked to 3 former players yesterday, just randomly, from 3 different schools, about things totally unrelated to SMU or anything like that, and it does mean the world to me. And how many of those guys that I've coached, whether it's following me on social media or whatever, they feel a connection to my family and to my kids. One of those guys, my son and daughter were babies when I coached him, and they were in high school when I talked to the other guy, and the other dude, they weren't born yet, but he's watched them grow up on Instagram. So that stuff is really, really cool.
No, that's amazing. I think just listening to you, it sounds like even at 2022, or it's going to be 22 years old, you had the ability to identify what your passion was, maybe not exactly your purpose, but you knew how you were wired and you knew what you valued. And it was the time you were spending with those young men, the impact you were making on them. And it sounds like they made one on you, especially if it was emotional when you were announcing that you were leaving. Coach, I just again want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for just sitting down and doing this with me. You shared a little bit about your website. If you could give us that again, and any other ways that the coaches out there who are watching this could follow you and keep up with all things Coach Rob Lanier.
Yeah, the site is called coachspeak.net, just like it sounds. It is a platform that I created in 2017 with the idea of giving coaches an opportunity to tell their stories, share their perspectives and their expertise in their own words. Similar to kind of the effect you get with the Players Tribune, but it's from coaches of all levels. But there's stories on the website by Dawn Staley, Matt Painter, Billy Donovan, Joe Jones. I mean, I could go on and on. A lot of recognizable head coaches, and a lot of coaches from very different levels, and stories of all kinds, not just basketball stories. I'll give you one example. Sure. Rodney Terry is serving as the interim coach at Texas right now. Rodney wrote a story called "Listen to Your Body," and he's referring to his personal experience with being in the grind of this profession and not taking care of his health, and how doing so put him in peril, like really put him in harm's way physically. And he had, what he thought could have been a near-death experience.
Wow.
And he had to take a step back. And so he wrote about that. That's a part of us doing our job. You get so wrapped up in everything that's going on that you don't exercise, eat right, take care of yourself, and you're worried about so many other people and things that you have to do inside your program. And you might not even listen to some signs that your body might be giving you that things ain't right.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, among many others. You're not going to go to the page and just get X's and O's. Gotcha. In fact, you're not going to get X's and O's. It's about, I think coaches are great storytellers with great stories themselves and a lot of responsibility to lead people. And so it's a place where coaches get to share that. People like yourself, if you got something you want to share, let me know. But that's what it's about.
Can't wait to check it out. And that sounds intriguing. So coachspeak.net, we'll make sure that we list it here on the screen for you guys if you want to check that out. Coach, how can they follow you on social media?
I'm off of Twitter now. And
Okay.
I got a private account on Instagram.
In other words, so don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. But I do have a page for Coach Speak.
Okay.
And so you can follow that, but it really won't be me. Gotcha. I do get on there sometime, but I don't post very much. But when new stories come, I post the stories, and every now and then I might retweet something interesting, but not much action there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And make sure you guys are following SMU men's basketball. Make sure you're checking out their games, because with Rob Lanier at the helm, they're gonna play hard, and we're gonna see some wins. We're gonna see some wins for sure. You guys gonna get them on the right track. But again, Coach, thank you so much just for your time. I know I've already spoken with one of your assistants, Chris Kreider. He's going to be hopping on soon. You're in the thick of it. You're busy, but you took your time just for us and to break the game down. So hopefully you guys got something out of that. Much love. God bless. Hope everyone has a good one. Signing off.